We're coming to you from the wonderful, beautiful campus of the University of St. Thomas in the heart of Houston, your Catholic Urban University, for a dialogue series entitled, For Such a Time as This, Houston 2036. Embedded, of course, in the name of our great city, Houston, is UST, so it's really the heart of Houston, UST 2036. We'll examine each week the current issues of our day through the very important lens and frame of Catholic social teaching and social justice. We will dialogue with one of our guests each week concerning the number one question yet to be answered, the great ethical, moral question: what is the fair and ethical treatment of all human beings? All human beings' lives matter. All human beings are equal. We ask each week also, what is your number one aspirational goal for Houston by 2036? Why 2036? 2036 is the 200th anniversary of the city of Houston and the University of St. Thomas' 89th year anniversary, on the road to our 100th anniversary. We will work backwards along this journey and timeline to 2036 to see how things progress between now, 2020, and 2036. All with what in mind? All with the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of the beloved community. How do we reach and become the beloved community? How do we make the dream of the beloved community a reality? And what are those realities in this post-George Floyd environment that we must be looking at? In this pandemic environment, in this economic downturn environment. And of course, faith and culture has so much to do and talk about those issues. And that's why I'm so happy and proud to have as my guest this week Father Binh, who is the director of the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture here at the University of St. Thomas. As you know, the Nesti Center, it was started by Father Donald Nesti 25 years ago, who was the original founder and director, and now taken over wonderfully by Father Binh. And I'll just read kind of the statement of the Nesti Center so you'll know the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. It offers graduate level programs that transform students by immersing them in the historical, cultural, and theological Catholic so that they will go out into American culture and be a leaven in delivering the good news. And no one does that better than Father Binh. And Father Binh, I want to just say welcome, and so great to have you here for such a time as this. And before we get into the work of the center or this discussion about faith and culture, you have such a wonderful, rich background, a global historical background and perspective. Why don't you tell our viewing audience a little bit about yourself before we dive into this discussion?
Thank you, Larry, for the invitation to share today. As a priest, I belong to the same congregation of Father Nesti, the founder of our Center for Faith and Culture. We are the missionary congregation. So most of us are going to different countries and working. We work for many years in Africa, actually from the 17th century until now. We have been working in almost like 65 countries, and I was sent by my congregation to go to Asia. We start our in 3 countries, in Philippines, in Taiwan, and in Vietnam. So I was sent there as the first person to go with a few students to study the whole context of Asia. And I was sent there to Taiwan and to work there for at least 10 years. I studied Chinese. It was a difficult language, but because I'm Asian and my father has the origins being Chinese, so I can pick up the language pretty fast. And I worked there, took care of 2 parishes, and worked there as also a vicar general for the diocese in Hsinchu, in the north part of Taiwan, helping to develop pastoral plans for the diocese and also to work in ecumenical kind of dialogue with different religious traditions, with the Buddhists, with the Taoists, with Christians, and with different, even the Muslims there. And then, so it was a very good experience. We focused more on the call to actions to become the embodiments of love, just like what you say, Larry, and Martin Luther King was talking about, to build up the beloved community. And I think that's the goal of most religions, religious traditions, is to be able to help us to recognize we are the beloved of God, of any religious founders. So it's important for us to know that. And so I was happy to work there for 10 years. And later on, I was asked by the congregation to move into China and work there for almost like 3 years off and on, to come in and out, and then 3 years actually living there and work there and help them to be able to do a lot of kind of enculturation, take the values of the gospel planted in the soil of China with all of the historical context, with all of the philosophical ideas of Confucius, of Lao Tzu, of all of the Asian thinkers. It was a very good experience. It was challenging, but at the end, I ran into some difficulty with the Communist Party members because I am not allowed to do any kind of formation work. Actually, most of my work in Asia was formation, so I was asked to leave the country. And I went back here and worked as the director for the Center for Faith and Culture, continue the legacy of the mission of Father Nesti.
And I got
That's
the first
basically
work.
my background.
Right. And I got to first work with Father Ben and get to know him really well when we did the Open Wide Our Heart Symposium on Racism, the Bishop's Pastoral Letter on Racism, as part of the 25th anniversary celebration of the center. And Father Ben, you impressed me at the time when we would sit and have this conversation about the importance of dialogue, and that dialogue leads people to discern the truth. And it's always about seeking the truth, whether it's individual or character development. And you've been very good about talking how we do that and seeking meaning and how faith encounters American culture to help us kind of understand those tenets. Speak to us a little bit about how that all comes together at the work of the center.
You know, we all come from different backgrounds, different social, political, or cultural backgrounds. Our languages sometimes are different. And in order for us to come to that mutuality, that mutual understanding, mutual appreciation of one another, uniqueness, we need to dialogue, we need to communicate. Communicate relies more on listening. I think a lot of people were thinking of dialogue meaning I'm talking and you listen to me. I think more on the other side, we need to raise good questions. We have to seek understanding. You know, we need to be humble enough to ask for questions of clarification, of relevant questions, so that we can come to understand better the other person. You know, sometimes as married couples, we marry for 10, 20, 30 years. I work most of my life with married couples, you know, and sometimes both of them come from the same culture. Most of them are Americans or Asians or Black Americans or whatever, Africans or Europeans. But sometimes we assume that we know one another. Sometimes we assume that we know one another culture. We know the other person before even we take time to talk, to dialogue. And so it's good for us to remove some assumptions we have and begin to be attentive, to the other person. When we see that person, are we looking through our own lenses? Are we just looking through our own interpretation of that person? And sometimes we react to that person because we have our own interpretations of their language, of their ways of communicating, of their body language. Sometimes it's good just to ask the questions for clarifications. If we have some feelings, we need to know our feelings and be able to sit down and say, this is my feelings. This is my reaction. I need to check it out. Am I making the correct assessment of the reality of the person in front of me? So sometimes it's good to be humble enough to say, I don't know anything. Can you let me know more? So there's two kinds of dialogue. A dialogue of truth and dialogue of love. But I think you have to assume that you must have love before you can dialogue. You have to have a dialogue of truth, because we were so ready to jump at it. I'm telling you the truth. If you don't have the love, you cannot take time to be patient, to listen, to gain up, to allow the other person to feel secure and safe, to open themselves up to share some of the areas of vulnerability, some of the struggles, some of the difficulties they have in relationship with you. So I think this is a dialogue. Assume that we must have love. And then what you are saying, that how can we know that, how can we become ambassadors of love unless we ourselves have to become the beloved.
Right. Well, let's talk about that love thing for a moment, because I think that's it. You've described the center as a round table, where you encourage people to come together, to make sure that all voices are represented around the table, that all perspective, opinions, and viewpoints are shared equally, and people have a chance to equally share their experience.
Yes.
Because what I hear you say so often, and watch you as you talk and do your work and your lectures, it really is that you just talked about love from the love perspective of relationships.
Yes.
That is developed, nurtured, and maintained based on mutual trust and respect. Because nothing happens without trust. Nothing happens without the trust. The trust comes from that love base that you talked about. There's a friend of mine calls it lovescaping, that you develop the landscape of love, that you nurture the landscape of love. And that if you do that, then you're talking not only out of your truth and your honesty, but you're talking out of your compassion and your humanity and care for the other human being, which is really what we're talking about, are we not?
Yes, you're correct. What you're talking about, that's I love that language, love landscaping. You can see through that kind of lens of love. Then you recognize that all of us, the basic need of human being is the need to be loved, to be understood, to be cared for. And I think that's what we receive from God. And sometimes we don't receive that from our own family of origin. Our parents, they are imperfect, like we are imperfect. So we cannot expect everyone will love us, that unconditional kind of love like God is giving us. But we know that because God loves us unconditionally. I just love to go back to the Bible. When Jesus was baptized, what did the Father say? This is my beloved son, okay? And I think every one of us, doesn't matter where we are Christian or non-Christian, we all are the beloved of God, because the love of God is universal. So it has to be assumed on that foundation. I think that's why the church was talking about when talk about faith. We all are created with that sense of human dignity. That means we are created in God's image. And that's so important. If we are not agreeing on that, that's human being, each one of us, doesn't matter our gender, our race, our ethnicity, our age, or our background, our cultural background. We all are children of God. And this is important. That's why I think our American founders, Jefferson, in 1776, when he wrote that the Declaration of Independence, when he said that all of us are equal because of the Creator. We are created by God, and I think that's important for us to go back to that concept that we are equal because we are created in God's image, and then that sense of equality there is really fundamental. We may not be the same. Because of our differences in talents, in gifts, and in our own physical appearance, but we are fundamentally the same because we are children of God. I think that's so important.
Well, right now, Father, as you know, we're in the middle of this kind of post-George Floyd reality, on that very point of human beings being equal, of all human beings' lives matter, all human beings are equal. And that point that you just raised is a cultural thing in America, systemic to us in the way we've dealt with human beings and slavery. And the point that you just made, even going back to the Constitution, even in the Constitution itself, there were certain people that were not deemed as fully human being. In fact, Blacks, African Americans were only 3/5 of a person, 3/5 of a human being in the Constitution. And so that legacy of slavery and being only 3/5 of a human being deemed in the Constitution still lingers today. And that's why you see the vestiges of slavery being played out in today's American culture, and the way that it is being done, even in the wonderful, unfortunate graphic description with George Floyd's murder and death. And I'll just say this because I want you to comment on how faith encountering America's culture has to speak to this.
Yes.
You and I haven't had a chance to talk about this offline, so we'll do it here online. The reason it was so easy for the Minnesota policeman to put his knee on George and continue to hold not a human being, because he did not see him as a human being, a non-human being, a half human being, a less than human, a piece of property, a thing, and it, because that's how he understood that which was under his knee. And because he did not see that thing under his knee as a fully human being equal to him and to everybody else in society, he was able to do what he did. Now that goes back in American culture, back to slavery. And so faith encountering American culture today has to speak to that reality, as you just said, from a love and gospel perspective. Are human beings all equal or not? There is no connoisseur, there is no masa menos, there is no more or less.
Yes.
Either we are all human beings equal under God and treated equal as human beings, or we're not. And you hit on something else, and I'll stop here and let you respond. The thing about the Constitution, as you know, citizens in a democracy love to talk about 2 of the 5 things of what it means to be a citizen. My individual rights and privileges, because that's the great I and me discussion. It's all about me. I might say it's about you, but it's really all about me. But what about the other 3 of the 5 tenets of what it means to be a citizen living in a democracy? Our common duties, obligations, and responsibilities to whom? The other. Define the other in our society.
Yes.
Someone different than myself, someone that does not look like me, that's the rub. But
Yeah.
as you have said many times, particularly when we did the symposium on racism, that's the we and us discussion, right? It's about we and us. It's not about I and me. So what does fate say to American culture who is still wrestling with this issue all these many years? Just a basic thing. Are all human beings equal or not?
Yes, Larry, I think you just have the finger on the fundamental problem that human beings have. I think in principles, we all agree that all humans are equals. But in practices, a lot of people are subjected by their personal bias, social political bias, and root bias. We begin to think that we are better than the other person. And we look down on the other persons, and you say that, you know, Black Africans or Black Americans are only 3/5
in the Constitution.
Correct.
In the Constitution.
The church teaching is clear that racism or any discrimination based on sex, race, ethnicity, age constitutes a grave injustice and affront to human dignity. And I think that we need to hold on to that. That's the teaching of the church. I mean, human dignity, we all are equally created as children of God. And we are maybe different because of our color of skin, because of our social political backgrounds. But we all are equal. We need to hold on to that. And so you want to talk about racism. There are personal racism, social, institutional, and structural racism. You know, I mean, and sometimes we have to deal with that. As long as they are human beings, because humans tend to be self-centered. And we study the anthropology, the development of human society. We know that how humans often enough look down on the other persons, you know, and we turn the other person into the it. It's not I and thou relationship. It's I and it.
Right.
And it's important for us to, as Christians or as those who have been formed by the social teachings, but by the understanding of the common good and the true sense of that beloved community, to be able to change the it into the thou. And when we have that I and thou relationship like God, you know, I mean, if we talk about prejudice, God has a right to be prejudiced because we humans, we cannot become like God. But God so loved us so much that he treated us like, like his own, his children. Because of each one of us, he willing to die on the cross for us. That's what we talk about. The dignity of a human person is so indispensable, it's so valuable, but even God willing to die for it. And so we as Christians, we say that we love God. If we don't love one another, if we don't love those who are different from us, we are not really the disciples of Christ. We are not even children of God. We are not even human when we don't love the other person.
So what's happening, Father? It's really about our common humanity, and you're so right. And the phrase that you use and paraphrase, how do people talk about a love of a God that they cannot see and do not love the neighbor that they see in front of them? And,
I think so.
And then talk about that we're all okay, and that there's no passion around this injustice that we see around us every day. There's no advocacy. There's no people calling out the injustice that they see clearly in front of them every day.
I think the problem, like Gandhi, of India, mentioned that a lot of Christians who are not Christians by facts, They may be named as being Christians, but they have not, like Pope Francis said, they have not even encountered Christ. They have not even have a relationship with Christ. They have not experienced that redemptive love of God flowing into their hearts, into their lives, and change them inside out to help them to have a conversion, intellectual conversion. We all have our own frame of reference. We look at other people, we define their significance, their values by how we see them. And that's why we need to have intellectual conversion. Just like some of our founders in the past, they was conditioned by their cultural, social context. So that's why they have, some of them even have slaves, And they can write beautiful documents, but they have not really allowed the document itself. We all are created equally by God, to penetrate in their hearts and change their lifestyle and have what called moral conversion. That means change their behavior, their attitude toward others, And it's important for us to have that moral conversion. And you see how many Catholics, how many Christians who have not even encountered Christ. How can you talk about intellectual conversion? How you can talk about that kind of affective conversion? People don't feel compassionate toward other people.
Right.
They don't feel love toward someone who are different from them. They just want to stay in their own clique because the lifestyle enclave, Those who share with me the same interests, the same kind of lifestyle, the same color of skin, the same kind of social political agenda, then I will consider them as being equal with me.
So how do we
do that? So we need to be able to move beyond that boundary of that kind of intellectual, whether we admit it or not, it's there. It's the lenses that shape our way of seeing things, of seeing other, of relating to other. And this is so deep-rooted, it becomes very unconscious, it becomes instinctual, That's why.
So how do we get to
rely on the grace of God to change? Only the redemptive love of God can actually go deep enough to the unconscious level to uproot something which is really there, controlling us before even we think, before we even feel, before we only have a reaction for other people. So I think
how do we get to the point of this individual and collective? This individual and collective koinonia, this change of heart, how do we get to that point of being able to have people not necessarily understand what they're called to do and be as advocates, but at least be willing to explore that perhaps in their Christian, when I say Christian, church, parish, temple, synagogue, and mosque, Friday, Saturday, Sunday worship, doesn't really matter. All the same. It's all the same. That are not living up to all those tenets that they say they believe, all those doctrines, all those principles. You can see it every day not being lived out in society. So this encounter, this clash of society and culture with faith and values seems to be really at a lowest point that it's been almost in any time in human history.
You know,
Right today.
you know, Larry, I think you just raised a good question. That's why I'm just from the beginning. Dialogue can only happen when we raise the relevant question. The question I think the problem, if we go to the underlying problem right now, I think it's one of the 7 deadly things really are so relevant right now in our society is sloth. Sloth,
Yes.
S-L-O-T-T. That means everything go. Relativism, secularism. We have the laziness of our soul. We don't feel there is important. The spirituality is not important. The transformation of the heart is not important. The transformation of the mind, the mind conforming to the truth is not important. Everyone, you talk about the beginning, individualism. Everyone have their own thinking. They have the right to do whatever they want to do. Individual property, even though I have so much wealth, I don't want to share. And all of these things, you talk about, people don't talk about community anymore. Even the family is breaking down. And the husband and the wife pursue their own interests. And my interest is become dominant, become the priority. And so all of these things, everything go. So there is no criteria for objectivity. There's no criteria for making judgment of values. And that's what's confusing. Everyone has their own arguments. And then so how do we solve the problem? Because everyone thinks that they are the Almighty God. We are not admitting we are human. We don't admitting that we are sinners. I think one of the first things we need to do, we need to have the conversion of heart, that we have the sense of repentance. We have to see that we are sinners. We stop scapegoating, pointing the finger to the other person. Each one of us have to become like one of my great thinker, Bernard Lonergan, I love him. He talked about the whole transformation of the society, the bringing about that sense of communion is beginning with the conversion of the subject. Each one of us have to be humble enough to say that I have problems. Oh, my seeing is distorted. My intellectual perception of reality is having problems. My way of experiencing things, I am so selective. I only want to experience certain things. I don't want to experience other things. When people are different from me, I just screen them out. I just don't want to have anything to do with them. And so if your experience is so limited, therefore your understanding have problem. And then so you are not really intelligent anymore. And so how can we dialogue when people become so relative and subjective, and there's no objectivity anymore? There's no willingness to talk what we should talk about, the dialogue of truth.
Right, let me pivot for a moment, because you and I could go on for another half hour in this. By the way, you can see that he has no passion for this. You can understand he has no. It's really great. I love having a conversation with Father Binh. By the way, his name means peace in Vietnamese, so he is a peacemaker, even in his name. So anyway, let me pivot a little bit. The 10th anniversary of the Faithful Citizenship is coming up, the Faithful Citizenship celebration, and we talked about values and culture. We talked about families and we talk about couples. You mentioned couples and mentioned families. We're honoring a couple that evening who really live out all these values in their own lives as a married couple, in their family lives, and their children. And we're honoring Kathy and Dr. Joseph Garcia Pratt on that evening. The evening is October the 7th, Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, from 7 to 8 p.m. You can go online, look up under the Faith and Culture on the UST website. But tell us a little about this wonderful 10th anniversary Faithful Citizenship, and that name is important. It is all about being a faithful citizen. So tell us about this great evening that's coming up that we're going to be doing here in a little while.
The reason we selected them and invited them to be our honorees, Kathy and Joe are wonderful parents, and they're not simply parents; they're also educators. Mm-hmm. They have so many children, so all of them are sons, but they are very good citizens of this country. They make a lot of contributions toward the society, and they help, just like what you talk about, to upbuild that beloved community. And I think a family right now is so important. It is the foundation of the society. When the family is breaking down, it just you cannot hang on the values, the good kind of moral principles down to the next generations. You see, that's the problem we have with some of the problem with the racism toward the black community, because they don't have enough educations, and there's no equal opportunity in education toward them. And also most of them come from broken families, and the society have not giving adequate attention to them and give them that basic need for education. So I think most of them come from broken families, don't either have one or not having any parents. And so that's why it's important for us to focus on the importance of family. For the family, not simply the family, but the society is the family. The church is the family. We all need to be bonded together. We need to provide a sense of belonging, a sense of participation, the sense of mission. And each one of us have to be inspired by that zeal for mission to do what? To help other people to become better,
right.
to seek the good of the other person. That is love all about. I think right now all of us just so much focus on what satisfy my own kind of the disordered desires. You know, we need to move toward that, which is really what we call. That's why the church is calling. We all missions is the works of the whole church, not simply of the leaders of the church or different religious community, but every believer. Doesn't matter which tradition they're coming from, they all have that call to share in that mission, to seek the good of the other person, right in front of your neighbors. How do we treat my neighbor? How do I treat my family members? How do I respect and honor their dignity? How I provide for all of the accessibility toward them, for their education, their clothing, their vital goods. I mean, if the vital goods we are not providing for our family, how can we expect them to have the social good, the cultural good, and the religious goods? You know, I think that's why it's so important for us, in order for us to be able to provide the solid vital goods for all of the members of the society. We need to be people who have been filled with the love of Christ. We need to encounter Christ. We need to know what is love about. Love is self-giving. It's not self-taking. It's not self-centered. It is sacrifice myself. The whole family is built on what? Sacrifice. If we're not willing to turn the family into an altar whereby we sacrifice our own individual needs or desires, we will not be able to build up a family. Look at Joe and Kathy. They are able to do that. That's why they have the sense of harmony and unity, and they have a sense of beloved community among themselves, the two of them, and the children. And I think by honoring them, we are basically telling all of the people, doesn't matter what background we're coming from, what kind of family origin we're coming from, with God's help, with the love of God, with the graces of the redemptive love of Christ, we can change our situation. We can become a solid unit of the cell of the society. That's not a cancerous, but rather a living cell that will generate life. And it's important for us to collaborate together. It's not the work of this person or that person, of the husband or wife, but the whole groups together. And how we support these small units. We need to have religious values. We need to have the correct understanding of the religious values. If we don't have correct values, if the value is individualistic values, that doesn't work. The values have to be building on what? On the strong sense of common good. The strong sense of common good.
We're going to have
and the common good must be founded on what? On truth.
Right.
It must be built up in justice. And it must be animated by love. And what
All
is
right, we're going
common
to leave it at
good?
that, Father. We're going to leave it at that.
Huh?
We have to leave it at that for time wise. We're going to have to pick this conversation up again with you and the rest of the staff of the Institute. We'll do that, or the center. We'll do that at a future date. We'll get all three of you on, and we'll have a much deeper dialogue. We'll have to leave it at that for time wise, though. For now, let me just say you can contact and follow the work of the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. Center for Faith and Culture at St. Thomas. That's St. Tom, THOM. Center for Faith and Culture at St. Tom @edu, or call 713-942-5006. Once again, 713-942-5006. I want to thank Father Ben for being part of this wonderful dialogue, the beginning of a wonderful dialogue, and for such a time as this. As you can tell, we could go with him for another hour easily. He has the passion, the dedication, the love for all humanity. He has a sense of purpose in what he's doing at the center. He wants us all to engage with each other from this love humanity perspective. And I really admire the work he's doing and his passion. That's what I keep telling people. This work is about passion. This work is about love. This work is about caring and concern and kind of giving of yourself to other human beings, which he does every single day. Father Ben, I can't thank you enough for being with us. We're going to follow up with you, and we'll have some more sections together here on this as we go forward.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Let me give you a few closing comments, and then we'll move on for this segment. I want to just close with three thoughts that I think fits very well in this post-George Floyd environment that we're working in. It kind of fits in with everything Father has said. I think there are three important things I like to highlight. Different is different, amen, period. Not better than, not more than, not less than, just different. Mm-hmm. Because we're all different as human beings. We all have different experiences. Our daily lived experiential realities, are all just different. Not better, not worse, not less. I grew up in Orange, Texas with the Klan. My life was cemented in a way because of being around the Klan, all that early formation part of my life. That's just my experience. The second one is this, which speaks to the love. We have to learn to be aggressive to the issue and reconciliatory to the person involved in the issue. Aggressive as necessary to the issue, and yet as reconciliatory as possible out of love to the person involved in the issue. And the third one I know to be true because I've seen it for the last 50 years of my life played out in every way when it comes to systemic and institutional racism. The master, however you define the master never gets tired of being the master.
Yes.
Therefore, it is always incumbent upon the oppressed one to initiate change. Don't expect it. Don't wait for it. The master never gets tired of being the master. It is always, therefore, incumbent upon the oppressed one to initiate change. Another way of saying that, power never yields.
Yes.
Without a direct force to help it yield and give in and give over. So, in those sharing thoughts, let me just say as we go forward in this great environment, I use the word great somewhat hesitancy here, the environment of the pandemic, the environment of the economic crisis, the environment of the racial crisis that we're in, the environment of all the other issues that we have to face as human beings together. It is important that we do two important things. You know what those are. Stay well and be safe so that you can be a vessel, so you can be of help to other human beings. You have to take care of yourself first. I get to be selfish only in one regard, to make sure I take care of myself so I can be selfless in my service to other human beings. That's what it means to be a servant leader. That's what it means to be a true servant leader. And so as we come to you in the weeks to come on this wonderful series from the University of St. Thomas for such a time as this, we look forward to you joining us, look forward to you being part of it. And until then, as always, peace, power, and love.